Good afternoon and welcome to XL Catlin Arctic Live here from the UK Arctic Research Station in Ny-Ålesund on the island of Svalbard, and we are currently halfway between the top of Norway and the North Pole. We are in Ny-Ålesund, which is a research village, a scientific research village, so we have an international community here studying the Arctic. And we're just going to take you outside to show you around where we are. We've got some questions that have been sent through in advance, and we've got the live stream coming up shortly, so we'll be back inside in just a minute to answer those questions. But we thought we'd just give you a look around to see actually where we are. So we're coming out from the storeroom of the UK Arctic Research Station, of course storing a boat and various other pieces of equipment needed to explore and research the Arctic environment. Just popping out the back door here, just move some boots out of the way and give you a wonderful view of the surrounding area. It's an absolutely stunning view. We're looking, get my bearings right, east here, down Kongsfjorden. Now you'll probably be able to see the sort of slightly darker strip of water here. Now that's the fjord, or sea inlet. And that's where we've been studying ocean acidification and microplastics. The team are currently out in a small boat here, trawling for plastics and trawling for plankton, and that will give us a better understanding of how plastics are affecting the marine creatures here, and really basically find out how much microplastic there is in the ocean here, and whether that's in the water, in the plankton as I referred to earlier, or even down on the bottom of the sea. We send down grabber to grab some of the sediment and find out what's there. But it is stunning. I'll just give you a sort of look around. You might be able to see sort of light blue patch at the end there. That's the Kongsvegen, one of the glaciers coming down into the fjord. You might also see some bergy bits. So these small icebergs have wanted to lodge over here for the past few days. And that's when the bits of the glacier carve off, break off, and float down on the fjord. Just coming round the corner, Ellie's got the camera here. We can see some of these glaciers coming down between these peaks. That's the Mittra Löwengreen. So that's where we did some glacial work a couple of years ago, looking at the microbiology of that glacier over there. You can probably hear quite a lot of noise behind me, so just turning around. And often, you think that an Arctic research station might be this tiny building in the middle of nowhere, but in fact, as I mentioned earlier, we're part of an international research community. We're in a very isolated spot, so we've got the diggers, we've got the fuel storage, the power station, workshops, everything really that you need to survive in an isolated community. There's no way we can just call in the local council or something to come and fix something. Have to be very, very self-reliant. And then we have the research station itself, and there are various buildings like this around which provide housing, the bedrooms, laboratory space, office space for visiting scientists. I think there are about 10 different countries that have stations up here. So we've got stations from South Korea, China, Italy, Netherlands, Germany, France, Norway, and others. And this is really the home from home for the 2 weeks we've been on Arctic Live. Fantastic place. It means that scientists from universities across the UK and collaborating institutes across the world have somewhere where they can easily access this amazing environment. So you have all your equipment, you have the bedrooms, you have the storage. You've got a group here heading down to the parlour area, maybe taking some samples down or getting ready to go out sampling. So a simply stunning area, and what I love about Ny-Ålesund is you can have the creature comforts of the research station, but be out in the amazing Arctic wilderness in just minutes, whether that's by boat or skidoo. And I'll just let you enjoy this view that we enjoy on a daily basis when there isn't huge amounts of snow. The pyramidal peaks there, the 3 crowns, and that is about 30 kilometres, 20 miles away, just to show how clear the air is up here in the Arctic. Magical place to be able to work, a magical place to be able to talk to you guys from all the classes and all the schools who are taking part at the moment. Let's pop back inside and see what questions have come through. Although it's a wonderfully warm 0 degrees at the moment, just keep the door closed. Keep the Arctic air out and take a seat again and see what questions have come through. Great to have, we've got Hawkley Hall High School in Wigan, and we've got Manuela Pereira from Espinho in Portugal, who submitted questions in advance, and very much looking forward to also seeing any questions that you send through on the live chat during this call. And I'm just going to pass a mic over to Ellie, who's going to come and join me here.
Hi everybody. It really is beautiful out there, isn't it?
I think it has to be one of my favourite views in the world, looking down the fjord from the station here. Especially
on a day like today where all the peaks are glinting in the sun. It really is stunning. We're very, very lucky to be up here.
It's not always like this.
Yeah, that's true. But that's the good thing about this place, is that no matter what the weather, it's always beautiful. Even when it's overcast, it's still, the grey is very dramatic.
Yeah, I wouldn't quite go for beautiful. I'd go for challenging and dramatic, maybe, when it's complete whiteout and you're somewhere on a glacier, which can be challenging. Last year, coming back from a research site on a glacier over this side, the Ostrobogabrin, there was one time when I couldn't see the ground for the 0 ground contrast. That's where the cloud and the ground sort of merge into one whiteness, and we nearly sort of went off the edge of something.
I think that's a really important point as well. I think perhaps if people haven't been to the Arctic, they're not aware of how many different shades of white there are, and they all blend in together.
Yeah, that decided to be one shade of white.
Yeah,
that day.
Sort of the fact that you lose sense of distance and space, and almost you're sort of looking out into the whiteness and trying to focus on things, and sometimes it can be very difficult.
Yeah. So the weather can change very, very quickly here, meaning that you can go up on a glacier on a snowmobile or on a skidoo, and it can be bright sunshine. Or sort of semi-cloudy day like it is now, and then the weather can change and you have great difficulty getting back down again. And also you might see shapes in the snow. I think we thought we saw a polar bear last year, and a flare pistol fired off into the driving snow just in case, as you're sort of looking at snow, sort of, is that a shape, is that nothing, is that something? So it can be quite scary when that happens.
And it's amazing how the sled dogs are able to distinguish. They must have much better eyesight for these conditions than us, because they can just charge off, drag a sled at full speed, and they're very confident with where they're going, even though the person driving the sled might not be able to actually see in front of them properly.
Yeah, I mean, I've never used dogs in the polar regions, but the station manager, Nick, was telling us how it is often much safer to work with a dog team because they've got a much better sense, as Annie, you said, that than a human does of trying to see where you're going. I eventually got off the skidoo and walked and tried to find the tracks again, and then we made our way back, and then dropped out of the cloud and could see the way much more clearly. But for a few minutes there, it was fairly sketchy.
A bit scary. Okay, fantastic. Right, so let's get on to some of these questions now. We've got some fantastic questions through, so thank you very much for sending them through. And if you are watching live, remember you can still submit questions live on the YouTube chat as well, and we'll try and pick some of those up. But let's get started then with Hawkley Hall High School. That's in Wigan in the UK. And Megan has a question for you. She says, have you seen any rare species while you've been in the Arctic?
I don't. It's difficult to say insofar as that, we've seen an Arctic fox, we've seen reindeer, we've seen a few examples of marine invertebrates, so crabs and amphipods and a couple of little polychaete worms. And we've only found one krill during our trawl, so that's looking fairly rare at the moment.
You seem quite rare.
I don't think you're probably referring to krill, Megan. But lots of wonderful migrating wildlife in terms of the seabirds we have up here, so little auks and the eider ducks. But in terms of those sort of rarer animals, blue whales, white whales, beluga whales, and polar bear, we haven't had those yet this trip, but we might just keep an eye out behind us, and if we're lucky, one of those might come past during this call.
We did see a walrus out on the research boat yesterday. Yes. Very fleeting, quickly sort of popped up to say hello and then disappeared again. So that's quite a rare sighting, I think, isn't it?
Well, there's a walrus colony just down the way. So if you're out that way, a chance of seeing them, but not so many up here by the station.
Okay, thank you, Megan. And Megan, I don't know if it's the same Megan or another Megan, but Megan, Holly and Harriet all jointly would like to know what's our source of electricity here in the Arctic. It's an interesting one.
It is an interesting one. As I pointed out when we're outside, that we are necessarily a very sort of self-sufficient community here in the Ålesund. And the power station is run on diesel. And it feels slightly ironic to be working on the impact of climate change and the impact of ocean acidification and all these other environmental issues while having a fossil fuel based form of power. But working with solar energy or wind energy in somewhere like Ålesund is incredibly difficult. You've got 4 months of the year, you've got complete darkness.
Solar would not be very useful.
No, and you've got high winds coming through a lot of the time, which can be incredibly damaging for the wind. Yeah.
You have tried building wind turbines in the Antarctic.
I have built.
Shetland.
No, South Shetland.
South Shetland.
South Shetland. So just off the Antarctic peninsula. So we did put up 3 wind turbines on the South Shetland Islands, just off Antarctica, and that successfully powered a base. We're just there for 2-3 weeks, and we powered a base using renewables, but we managed to mangle quite a lot of equipment and have to repair bits and pieces.
It really is such a hostile environment here with the strong wind that there's not much that would survive it. So perhaps some really industrially ruggedized wind turbines might just cope.
Well, I think together with the cold and the wind, I mean, it could work for some of the time, but in terms of safety, you need a reliable source of power and fuel. In terms of science, you need a reliable source of power and fuel. So we've got 2 freezers here, one down to -20 Celsius, the other down to -80. And a lot of the scientific samples need to be kept at a constant temperature. So you can come up here, do the science, put your samples in the freezer, you don't have a reliable source of energy. The freezers go off, it warms up, and you've lost all your samples, which kind of sort of...
It'd be devastating, wouldn't it, for the research?
Sort of, it cancels that reason for coming out here. So, ironically, this is Megan, Harriet and Holly, ironically, we use fossil fuels up here. It would be wonderful if we could use something else.
But I suppose in a region like this that's so remote that we can't afford to lose power for both the science and our own health and safety, it's almost acceptable, or at least the reason behind it is a bit more valid. So that's all the more reason for other parts of the world that aren't so remote and do have the option of using solar or wind or other forms of renewable energy, or cutting down on their consumption of energy. If they're able to, they could be working on switching across to more renewables.
Yeah, I think, wherever you are, you make the choices that are most suitable to reduce your impact on the environment, and that's certainly the case in the Ollesund. So we've talked about, we haven't talked about yet, where the community here is making as much of a difference as possible, and that is through very careful consumption of electricity, only using when it's necessary, very careful consumption of water, there's a finite water supply, although it's coming off the glacier, and 23 different categories of rubbish. And in the kitchen as well, you can see very clearly that we have a meal on Thursday night, and then the next lunch is using the leftovers from that meal, and then the following lunch is the same thing. So you can see how the food waste is cut down upon, how the community is looking to manage its waste as well as possible. It's probably the most different categories of waste that I think I've ever come across.
Very impressive. There's hundreds of bins all around, and everywhere there's a waste area that's separated into all these different categories. People are very diligent about it, and all the waste that can be recycled is, and even that very small amount of food waste, a surprisingly low amount of food waste, is recycled or composted. Really very impressive. And I think a lot of schools, for example, could maybe learn a lesson from the efficiency and the resourcefulness of somewhere like this. It's a similar environment.
Well, I mean, it ties into a lot of discussions around school food and trying to make the most out of the very small budgets that are set aside for food. And if you can reuse and find a way of that meal can then become this meal, etc., then that's a great way of cutting down your impact and having, in the end, better food because you're not wasting so much.
Definitely. Brilliant. So thank you for that question, and I'm sure Megan, Holly and Harriet are going to become energy ambassadors for their school now and
fantastic.
Try and figure out a way to reduce their consumption. Neve and Jess, also from Hockley Hall High School, have asked, how long can you stay in the Arctic for? That's an interesting question. We've had a few people ask, how long have we been here? But actually, how long can you stay?
People live here the whole time.
Yeah.
And for a number of years. It really depends on the project you're doing, on the science you're doing. So we've come up this year to collect samples from the fjord. So we're doing a 2-week study, and in fact we've only marked down we must do 4 days of work because of the issues with weather. Out of a 2-week period, we can hopefully have, fingers crossed, have 4 days when the weather is good enough to get out and collect those samples. So we're here for 2 weeks. Other teams might be here for 4, 6, 8 weeks, or year-round monitoring. So you can stay for quite some time. And
our station manager here, Nick Cox, was talking about some of his polar stints, and one of them was 33 months in one.
33 months.
Antarctic.
So when I think Nick did his apprenticeship in 1975 to 1978. That was, you take a boat from England and you go south, and you're away for 33 months. So that's 2.5, 3 years, a long time. And I think he said he had 100-word telex.
Yes.
Back home, was his once a month back home. And so yes, I think time has changed since then. We're broadcasting live rather than relying on 100-word telex once a month.
And those interviews with Nick Cox are available on the YouTube channel. We did those yesterday. And so do watch back and listen to some of Nick's stories because they are fantastic, really, really interesting stuff. Okay, so thanks for that question. And then we've got Lucy, Eleanor and Jessica Hi girls. They want to know what made you want to be an explorer?
Wow, what a great question. Thank you, Lucy, Eleanor, and Jessica. Great question. I wouldn't quite call myself an explorer, but I have had the privilege to work in some truly amazing places and to find out what they're like, how they're changing, and what we can do to support these habitats. I think it's just, I love the natural world. I love being out in the world. I love finding new places, being curious. And it's just a complete joy. I mean, coming to somewhere like the Arctic is so special. Really is. And it is, I think, and I've mentioned this before, but it's the light up here that makes it so special. I mean, it's difficult when it's a bit cloudy, but I've had the sort of air freeze and feel like walking sort of through fairy dust. I've seen the northern lights. I've seen sun dogs and sun columns and sort of odd rainbow bits around the sun.
Can you explain what sun dogs and sun columns are?
Yeah, a sun column is when you've got ice particles. And normally when the sun's quite near the horizon, you get the sun is like a sort of column rather than an orb. And then sun dogs are two mini suns or sun columns sort of on the horizon either side of the main sun. So it's like the sort of science fiction film where you have a sort of like a strange sun in the middle and you've got two little suns on either side.
Sounds phenomenal. Sounds really special.
Very special.
Right, so that's definitely a reason to be an explorer. Hopefully,
yes.
I'm sure everybody watching now also wants to become an explorer. And talking of people watching live, we're going to go over to some questions from the live chat. Do keep them coming in. We've got some great questions from CIS in Lagos. And first up, what natural resources are present in the Arctic? That's a good question.
Wow, very good question. Where we are, Ny-Ålesund started off as a coal mining settlement. And continued to be connected to coal mining until I think the late 50s or early 60s when there was an accident and that stopped the coal mining here. So Svalbard very rich in coal, and there is still coal mining taking place on Svalbard. So that's one example. And in terms of extractive industries, it was also a very abortive marble mining attempt on the far side of the fjord in a settlement called New London, which I think was a London-based company that thought they could find an alternative to Italy. Yeah. Set up New London. It failed.
High hopes, didn't they?
High hopes, but complete failure. The marble quality was rubbish, and they came back over to this side of the fjord and brought 4 of the houses with them. So these are the London houses, just out of the window here. Named after New London, the other side of the fjord.
So those houses that you saw behind Jamie at the very beginning when he was outside, the little yellow houses with a cute little chimney on the top, were actually built on the other side of the fjord and brought over here when that marble collapsed.
And then in terms of other resources, increasingly the fisheries, people are interested in fisheries in the Arctic, and even more so now that global warming is meaning those fish stocks are coming further north, and you might have seen in the news also various companies thinking about drilling for oil in the Arctic.
Yeah, absolutely. So then back over to Hawkley Hall High School. We've got another question, this time from Caitlin, who wants to know, how do you help the animals and protect them from plastics and dangers? That's a big question there.
It is a big question, and I think there's sort of, in some ways, there's one fairly easy answer to that. Is to look what we can all do on an individual, a community, and a national basis. So in terms of individual, the behavioural changes that each and every one of us can do, and that in terms of protecting animals, it's not going and saving a sort of bird that's in a bit of trouble on the shore. It's looking at a sort of wider habitat basis and reducing our impact on the habitat, and that is coming from things like increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is driving warming, sea ice loss, other sort of glacial loss, and ocean acidification. And then the plastics piece as well, where a variety of marine life is eating plastics. So on an individual behavioural level, reducing our carbon footprint, biking, reducing our meat consumption, remembering to switch off the lights, that kind of thing. Plastics, getting rid of all the single-use plastics as much as we can.
I was trying to find if we've still got our straw from the live investigation.
We do. It's tucked behind yes.
So a good example of a very simple thing you can do, instead of using a plastic straw every time you have a drink, you can either ask for not having a straw, which is the easiest thing, or you can use your own metal or bamboo wooden straw. That's then reusable, and you can use it again and again and wash it as normal. And there's lots of alternatives, plastic alternatives, to your toothbrush or your face wipes, that sort of thing, that have plastic in them. You can find plastic-free alternatives. So you can sort of switch out these things and have the same lifestyle, but just in a more environmentally more friendly way.
Brilliant. So a lot of things that we can do on an individual basis. Then on a community basis, that's helping and supporting your friends, family and school community to make those changes as well. And perhaps looking at if you have the possibility of switching to a renewable source of energy at home, that's an option, and at school as well. If your teachers, I know certainly in schools in the UK this might be appropriate, leave their interactive whiteboards on during break. You can help them switch those off. And then on a national basis, I think it's really important to remember that not all this burden of protecting the environment needs to fall on individuals, such as ourselves, such as yourselves. We can also ask government to help, whether that's a local or national government. And then we've seen that in terms of changing the law around plastic bag charges, around what's the new one? There's a sort of earbuds.
Cotton earbuds. You normally have the bit in the middle, and you just hold it for 5 seconds, use it and bin it. And you can buy cardboard ones instead. So now they're banning the plastic ones.
Banning plastic, ban on microbeads and cosmetics.
Yeah, absolutely. And some countries like France have banned plastic cutlery, knives and forks, and plastic plates. The polystyrene food containers that you might buy your burger and chips in, that sort of thing. So gradually, countries are starting to implement these laws. And
you can become involved in that process by writing to your representatives and asking what they're doing to help. And then you'll get an idea of where they are in terms of helping habitats. And if you don't feel that they're doing enough, you can ask them to do a little bit more as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. So, a related question, and this is now moving over to Manuela Correa's eClub members.
Great.
Welcome back. Good to see you again. And Logia Oliveira, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, the 5B in 5B class. A related question, why is there so much pollution in the Arctic if almost no one lives there?
That's a really good question, and in terms of environmental impacts, you can really sort it into sort of two types of impact, and we call these sort of system-wide or systemic impacts, and that's where pollution in one area causes a global issue, and then we have local impacts, and it's important to look at and address both of them. So you're very right. Is it Logia?
Logia. Apologise if that's not correct.
It's a great question. So that is one of the sadnesses, that you feel so remote here, you feel so far away from human activity, and yet you can see perhaps more clearly the impact of human activity here in terms of glacial retreat, lack of sea ice, warming oceans, different species coming up. I think they had mackerel up on the coast of Svalbard a few years ago, and that's a subtropical species, and that's being found in Arctic waters. So it is about these global changes that are taking place and these systemic changes, and that's one of the really interesting things about studying wolf science, is to understand how all these different parts of the world interconnect.
And it's perhaps because there's nobody else living here, that when you do see the pollution here, you realise how big of an impact it is having globally, because the only way it could have got here is if it's having a systemic, as you say, global impact. So it's especially important to look at when this particular area is being affected, and we know that the situation has sort of spread around the world.
So I'm just remembering that I'm supposed to...
So Jamie actually has a radio on him at the moment. Our boat is out, so our researchers are out at the moment, which means all this noise that you can hear is the communication between the boat and the base station. So health and safety is our top priority, so we do just need to keep an eye and make sure that everybody's safe and everything's fine. So we'll just be a minute or two checking that message, making sure that everything's fine. So this is live on a real-life Arctic research station, using radios, of course, because we don't have mobile phones. There's no phone signal here, so we have to communicate using a VHF radio.
Sorry, I'm just checking on the...
Yeah. So this is a really good example, a chance for you all to see what happens here on the base. There's always somebody who stays at base with the radio and listens, and then the teams that are out, either on the glaciers, on the skidoos or on the boats on the water, can radio back every couple of hours, or of course if there's a problem or an issue. Is that all fine?
The Arctic has decided to get involved in some machinery. So a little bit of winch issues on the small boat we're using for sampling, and so the team will have to come back into port, into the harbour, to see what we can do about that. So I was just checking in because I might have to go and see what needs to be done straight after this call. They're due back at 1600, which is in an hour and a half. So I might just have to go and see how we can support the scientists on that.
So this is, we promised you live broadcasting, and this is the very best of that. We've got situations changing all around us minute by minute, which is, you've got to be on top of it in the Arctic. You can't put your radio to one side and forget about it. You've got to be very responsive here.
So that was Nick, who's just got back, who's the station manager, just communicating with the team out on the boat there.
And the winch is pretty critical because that's what lowers the nets and raises them. So it's important that they come back in and we can try and get that fixed.
Well, on this one, we've got two types of trawls. We've got the surface trawls for plastic, so luckily we don't need the winch for that. But the vertical trawls, where we're trying to find the plankton, scoop up the plankton from a range of depths, that's going to be, well, that's not going to happen until we get the winch fixed.
Okay, so thank you for bearing with us through that. Let's get back to some of your questions, especially if you might need to dash off. So, back to Manuela Correa's E-Club members who are still here. Now this is a good one. Is it difficult for you to adapt to the extreme cold when we arrive? And what about on the way back as well? How do you adapt back to civilization after being out here for a couple of weeks?
Wow, I think you need to be out for a little bit longer to get into the sort of full sort of woolly field mode where sort of you become a little bit less civilized. I think slightly. You forget sort of polite company.
Beard.
So it needs a few more weeks to become sort of wilder.
Jamie did confess in an earlier YouTube session that he had to have how many baths when you got home from a particularly long expedition?
Yeah, it's 3. 3. It was very grey that first. Thank you. I do wash more often than once in 6 weeks. That was first sort of wash for 6 weeks' time, and that was particularly unpleasant. But it was also very strange on that trip. As I met people for the first time where they were wearing full Arctic togs, and never saw people just in sort of jeans and a sort of t-shirt and normal clothing, or without their hair in a with sort of goggles and hat, and so that's pretty well at all times. So it's almost like meeting the same group of people sort of twice. It's like, hi.
So they're unrecognisable. You've only seen this small bit of their face.
Just small bit, or the woolly hat and everything else. Oh, that's what you look like. So that was quite funny.
So somebody that you've spent several weeks very close to, spending sort of 24 hours a day together, and you don't actually know what they look like as a civilian.
No.
What a strange thought. Yeah.
So lots of big paddy sort of bottom clothes. Everyone's looking like sort of Michelin man, just all wandering around.
One thing I find when I come back from particularly polar regions is the noise difference, because it's so quiet here, such a sort of vast expanse of quiet. Even when it's windy, it's
apart from the building site and the diggers and being buzzed by the Coast Guard aeroplane and the helicopter that's gone past. Apart from all of that.
No, it's normally on, because the snow absorbs the sound. You get this sort of dampening of the sound. As even if you've been skiing, you'll know that kind of mountain quiet. And then you get back to central London, for example, and the traffic and the beeping and the noise and the talking. It's quite a contrast on the ears sometimes.
Yeah, green, I remember. So it's not so much here because there's quite a lot of contrast in the settlement, but when you can be out on the ice for some time and the complete absence of green especially. So that's a big thing coming back.
Yeah, brilliant. Over again to the live chat and back to the Children's International School in Lagos, who are asking, are you considering carrying out research at the Antarctic as well, in Antarctica?
I would love to go back down to Antarctica, so that would really be great. So I have been talking to some of the team here about maybe getting down to, if you're listening, British Antarctic Survey, if you would like to do Antarctic Live from Rothera, I'd be very happy to see what we can do in setting that up.
Well, they are called the British Antarctic Survey, so
yes.
We should really have one from the Antarctic.
I think we should do Antarctic Live. So if you'd like to write to the British Antarctic Survey, please do, and say, please can Digital Explorer do Antarctic Live, and we'll see what we can do for you.
Perfect. Over back to Miss Oliveira's 5B class. What are the most common animals here?
The most common animals, normally the most common animals you'd find in the Arctic sort of marine environment are going to be the plankton, so your amphipods, your copepods and krill. And those are the sort of small shrimpy-like creatures that form the bottom of the marine food chain. So they're the primary consumers. So they will be eating the algae and then taking all that energy and then forming the basis for all the fish and for everything else to sort of build up on top of that. So without them,
really critical base,
super critical. You don't get the whales, you don't get the walrus, and you don't get the sort of the polar bears and everything else. Yeah.
And you've got a bit of a thing about copepods, haven't you?
I've inherited a bit of a thing about copepods. So the first polar research expedition I went in was a copepod based study, and so I got stuck in a tent with some copepod aficionados in the middle of the high Canadian Arctic. And
what is a copepod?
What is a copepod? Well, it comes from the Greek for pod, which means foot, and kopos, copa, which is an oar. And so they sort of...
Very clever naming system.
There's all-footed creatures of the ocean.
Very useful language to learn, Latin. Latin and Greek, very useful because it helps you to understand all of the scientific names.
So they're awesome. They migrate vertically. They're only about yay big, depending on the species. So that's about a calamus size. Many moons ago, I never thought I'd know different species of Arctic copepod, but they have a vertical migration of, I'm trying to remember this, about 100 or so meters. So they're doing vast distances up and down. I think that
it's very, very fit, wouldn't you? Doing
it's
that
almost. Someone was saying that some of the vertical migrations are almost equivalent of doing sort of John O'Groats to Land's End as a human. And then what I also find amazing is how many there are. An estimated 1,347 billion copepods. So it's 1,347, 18 zeros.
Ask your teacher to write that number on the whiteboard and see how big of a number that is. It's really astonishing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that is supporting those copepods and the other plankton are supporting vast amounts of marine life above them.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. I can understand why you like them. So everybody can go and find out everything that they can about copepods as well. Back to Manuela Correa's E-Club members. What do you prefer to investigate in the Arctic or in Bermuda? Because we do have corals live as well, and looking at the lovely warm coral
I mean, they're both sort of, and the best term. They're both very, very interesting because they're both stunningly beautiful in their own way, but they're also both sort of early warning environments, so that changes that are happening in the ocean are going to be felt sooner on the reef and in the Arctic. So in that way, they're both very sort of interesting scientifically as well. And I'm going to massively sit on the fence on this one.
Several people have asked Jamie which one he prefers, and you always manage to. Not
do you know the one thing that's going to swing me to the Arctic is the narwhal. The narwhal's so cool. The narwhal. So if you've never seen a narwhal, then you've got the manta ray.
Narwhal versus manta ray. That's a question.
It's toughy. It's a toughie.
That's a class debate right there.
Okay, favourites. I'd like to see some favourites.
Send in your favourites. Narwhal, which is, as you describe it, a cross between
a dolphin and a unicorn.
A cross between a dolphin and a unicorn. How can a manta ray beat that? Oh, but they are beautiful though.
But they're sort of like, acrobatic UFOs of the ocean.
So we've got a dolphin crossed with a unicorn, or an acrobatic ocean UFO.
Yeah.
Okay, which one do you think is the winner there? And that's going to help Jamie answer whether he should stay in the Arctic or Bermuda.
Or both.
Or both.
C, both.
Yeah, C, both. Okay, right. So then another question on the live feed. This is from Clemens Weissleitner. Sorry if I'm pronouncing all these names incorrectly. Jamie, you've been to Ny-Ålesund in 2015. Do you experience similar weather and snow conditions this time around?
Clemens, hello, how are you? Hope a big hello. Clemens is from the research team at University of Innsbruck,
okay.
who were at the station in 2015. So when we're talking about the Meteorologenbreed and microbiology, that's who we were up with. And Clemens is a great polar photographer as well as an amazing scientist. So Clemens, if you have a URL with your photographs from the polar regions that you want to put up on the live chat,
please post it on the live chat.
Please post it up there.
He says it's great to follow science in the Ålesund via digital explorer.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Similar weather and snow conditions. No, I think if we were trying to get out to the glacial field sites that we're working on at the same time as the year, pretty well the same 2 weeks. I think we were here sort of maybe even sort of 3 days later. It's mush at the moment. It's gone really, really soggy. We've had rain, and I mean, getting out along the sort of the sort of forefield, out towards the glacier would be, I think, impossible. Most people have put their skidoos away for the year. No, it is definitely. I don't know whether it's warmer or whether it's just sooner, if that makes sense. Whether it's warmer sooner or just all round warmer than it was with us in 2015. And it's difficult also to say, is it just a blip between these 2 years, or is this what's going to happen now? If you come and try and do research up on the glacier in early mid-May, then it's not going to be possible anymore. You've got to come out in April.
Gosh. Right, time for just a couple more questions. One final question from Manuela Correa's eClub members. What's the most difficult situation that you've ever faced, and it might be the same, the most peculiar? So most difficult or most peculiar?
I think the most difficult stuff is what we were talking about earlier with the whiteouts. Can that be very disorientating, very, very scary, because you can just be 30 minutes from base and you can be completely shut down and not be able to see where to go, or where the edges are, or where the tracks are if it's snowing as well, because normally what you do is you just follow the tracks. You explore your way up to the field site, or if a lot of people go that way, you follow tracks and then you come back down on the same track. So that should be
actually sort of stand in your own footprints.
I mean, this is on skidoos, so this is on the lines that this skidoos make, and then when you can't see those on the way back, that can be quite scary, and you realise how sort of disconcerting it is to have this kind of base, because as soon as you're away, you are in the Arctic wilderness.
And you very quickly lose your sense of direction when it's all white out as well. So you could get yourself quite turned around. And
Exactly. The most peculiar thing I think I've seen here is a group of German scientists dressed as the Teletubbies. That was truly peculiar.
And I bet that's not the answer you're expecting.
And that was for Solfest, I think. So that Solfest is the celebration you have to welcome back the sun. So it's the first time the sun
after
comes
4 months of darkness
over the mountains behind us and sort of hits the valley floor of Solfest, and that's in early March.
What better way to celebrate the sun coming back than to dress as a Teletubby?
It was fancy dress that evening in the central canteen where we eat in the dining hall. But I did, some people make a real effort, and I think when you do have to make your own entertainment when you're up here, there isn't a cinema or whatever, bowling alley or whatever to go and do. So people are very creative when it comes to celebrating things like the sun coming back.
What's really impressive about that is that they must have brought those costumes with them on the plane.
I think actually no, they make them. We made them pretty. We also, as a UK station, I can't quite remember obviously the fancy dress that we wore, but we also made some fancy dress costumes, sort of with old boating suits and bits of this and that.
There you go. So the Arctic, a hub for fancy dress. Who would have thought? And just finally, one last question. And this is from St Bede's Ormskirk School in the UK. They've got a couple of different questions. And this one's an interesting one. How does your research benefit Svalbard?
That's a really good question. And I think, one way of looking at it is that we can only make decisions about how to change our behaviour, whether that's on an individual or a national basis by changing the law, if we have information. So if we have better information about how our actions are affecting Svalbard, and then we can change our behaviour, then that's how science can start to help places like Svalbard.
Be really almost a tool for the government and for local and global, as we said before.
Yes, I think we're asking these elected decision makers in lots of part of the world, say we want to vote you in, and we'd like you to look after our planet. And if they don't have the information they need to be able to do that, then it's very tough for them. Just to say, we might have seen a lot about how laws are changing because of plastics research. That research was led by Exeter in many parts, and that's the same team from Exeter, part of that team who are here with us in the Arctic.
Fantastic. So it's really great to see that research actually sort of creating change in government down the line. Brilliant, very good question. And there are other two little questions at the end. What other expeditions have you been on, and what have you discovered?
Wow, what other expeditions have I been on? Quite a few, but just to limit it to the past year or so. Up here in the Arctic last year, we're looking at the internal dynamics of glaciers, and so that was using a laser scanner. A team I was with using submersibles off Bermuda have just released an article yesterday or today. They've discovered a new layer in the ocean, a previously undiscovered layer in the ocean called the Rarephotic Zone. So congratulations to Professor Alex Rogers, Dr. Lucy Woodall, and Oliver Steeds, Mission Director of Necton. That's fantastic news. And 100 new species on that. So there's been some really great discoveries on the expeditions I've been involved in, and really exciting as well. Both on whole new parts of the ocean, and then on the other side, discovering how our activity is changing environments and affecting environments, and then the information we need to be able to modify our behaviour or bring in new laws.
Brilliant. And that latest publication there from Necton, will we be able to tweet that out, put it out on a link to it?
Sure, we'll be able to tweet that out. I'm sure the wonderful team back in London have access to the Telegraph article, which I don't think is behind a paywall, and so we can tweet that out.
Fantastic. So do follow that, and follow us, of course, on social media for other similar stories and links to latest research. Brilliant. Right, so that's unfortunately all we've got time for today. Thank you so much for getting your questions in, and to the schools that joined us. I'm going to pop behind the camera to finish us off, and I'll leave you with Jamie to say bye.
Thank you, Willie. Fantastic. Watch out for the acidifying bits down there. There are buckets of acid down here. In an hour's time, we'll be back with a live investigation on ocean acidification, and we do have some vinegar and a few other bits and pieces down here for that live investigation. 2 hours after that, we welcome back Dr. Katie Smith, who will be talking about her career and more about especially sea urchins and how they are affected by changes in pH in oceans around the world. And then we have, in 5 hours' time, a final Q&A, and that is really for our schools in North America, all the way from the East Coast to California, to tune into Arctic Live. So until this afternoon and those 3 sessions, it's goodbye from the Arctic, and thank you so much for taking part in XL Catlin Arctic Live.